This hearing went from sharp to openly personal in a hurry. Jared Moskowitz walked in loaded with headlines, internal accusations, and a leaked FEMA draft, then put Kristi Noem on the spot over Corey Lewandowski in a way that clearly made the room tighter. What starts as a brutal policy attack turns into a fight over power, credibility, and who is really running decisions inside DHS. If you like clear breakdowns of political moments without all the noise, hit subscribe, because this one had a lot more going on than a normal hearing exchange.
A Vox article, The Mess That Kristi Noem Made.
Without objection.
Times article, Noem's spending rule causes delays at Homeland Security.
Without objection.
Politico, vote to overhaul FEMA canceled after leaked report.
Without objection.
ProPublica, Kristi Noem misled Congress about top aide's role at DHS.
Without objection.
The Hill, Trump approval rating on immigration at record low.
Without objection.
Wall Street Journal, pilot fired over Kristi Noem's missing blanket.
Without objection.
CNN article, sources describe how Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's Gucci bag was stolen under her chair.
Without objection.
New York Times, late night is distracted by Kristi Noem's oversized hats. That one's my
Without
favorite.
objection.
And a Times article, some Republicans join calls for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to step down.
Right away, this is not a normal question and answer setup. Moskowitz is building a mood before he even gets to the main argument. He is basically saying, this is not one bad headline, this is a pattern. That matters because hearings are not just about facts, they are also about framing. By reading article after article into the record, he is stacking public embarrassment on top of policy criticism. He wants viewers, other lawmakers, and Noem herself to feel like the problems around her are everywhere. And notice the mix. Some of the headlines are serious policy hits. Some are more humiliating or tabloid adjacent. That is not accidental. He is blending institutional criticism with public ridicule, which is a pretty aggressive way to open. Honestly, once he starts that way, you already know he did not come there to have a polite exchange. But the next part is where he tries to turn that pile of headlines into a case against her actual leadership.
Objection.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your indulgence. Before I begin, first let me say to the families that are still here, I am very sorry for your loss. I watched parents in my hometown of Parkland bury their kids after the shooting at my high school at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and I can't tell you that it was an out-of-body experience, and there's nothing like burying a child. So I am deeply sorry for your loss. Madam Secretary, welcome. Good afternoon. Thomas Massey mentioned Ron DeSantis' response during COVID. Well, you're looking at the guy who ran that response. I was the Director of Emergency Management for the state of Florida. For a Republican governor, I worked with the Trump FEMA administration during the Category 5 Hurricane Michael recovery. That Trump's FEMA was great. We got expedited reimbursement, a program that you got rid of or threatened to get rid of. And the Panhandle had one of the greatest responses after that Category 5 storm. The President said he wanted to reform FEMA, but that's not what you did. You've basically destroyed the agency. Largest FEMA backlog in the history of FEMA. My state of Florida is owed $2.5 billion. You have delayed the FEMA disaster declarations even when the applicants meet FEMA's statutory threshold under the Stafford Act. You want states to do more, yet you want to cut the EMPG program, which grants them funding to build capacity. Your office was involved in discussions of moving FEMA to Texas. You created a rule of anything over $100,000 has to come to your desk, a rule that has slowed down FEMA reimbursement, FEMA response. We have empty regional offices. You have done the opposite of what President Trump wanted to accomplish, which was to speed up the process. Your policies have made the department slower. I didn't think it was possible to make FEMA more bureaucratic, but boy, you have exceeded all my expectations.
This is where he stops sounding like someone just throwing punches and starts trying to sound like a witness withstanding. He talks about Parkland, then his role in Florida emergency management, then his work with FEMA under Trump. He is doing that for a reason. He wants to make it harder for Noem or anyone else to brush him off as just another loud member trying to score a clip. Then he makes the core argument, not just that FEMA has problems, but that Noem made it slower, more centralized, and more dysfunctional. That is the main charge. He is saying her version of reform is actually bureaucratic paralysis. That line about not thinking it was possible to make FEMA more bureaucratic is one of those lines built for replay. It is sharp, easy to understand, and it sums up the whole attack in one sentence. If you were watching this live, that is the moment where you could tell he had come in with a full prosecution, not a casual critique. And then he raises the stakes by pulling out something much bigger than a talking point.
In the Texas floods, you didn't put the urban search and rescue crews on the road for 72 hours. Days later, the FEMA urban search and rescue chief resigned in protest. You hired 2 people as the administrator with no FEMA experience. We're on our 3rd history of the department has that ever happened. The president took presidential action to create the FEMA Council. I supported it. You opposed the FEMA Council. You delayed its beginning. The report has still not come out. The White House canceled your last council meeting and has held up the release of the report. But surprise, I have it. I have it. I want to thank the former FEMA employees that you fired who gave this to me. This report's never been seen in public before, okay? But this is it. This was the report. It was 122 pages, the original draft report. You and Corey Lewandowski then took the report and made it 23 pages. You cut out all the stuff that was put in by governors who had been through disasters, emergency management directors, FEMA experts, national security experts. You cut it all out. It's all gone.
This is the real reveal moment. Up to here, he is making accusations. Now he is saying he has material to back up at least part of the story. Whether every part of his claim holds up or not, the political effect in the room is immediate. But surprise, "I have it" is the kind of line members use when they want the hearing to become the story. And look at what he is alleging. Not just delay, not just incompetence. He is saying expert input was stripped out and that a major report got chopped down after political interference. That is a much more serious charge, because it suggests control behind the scenes, not just bad management in public. This is also where Corey Lewandowski stops being a side character and becomes central to the confrontation. The clip is no longer just about Noem's performance. It turns into a question about who is influencing decisions, who is editing substance, and who has real power inside the department. That leads straight into the most uncomfortable exchange of the hearing.
That's why the report's not been released. It's sitting in the White House trying to figure out this mess that you created. So instead of getting the recommendations we need, now we have nothing. You've called Corey Lewandowski a special government employee. I understand what government means. I understand what employee means, okay? But I don't know what makes him special. Now, I want to give you an opportunity to answer on the record to Ms. Camlager-Dove's question. I know you said it's garbage, and it may be, but I really think you need to say the word no into the record so that you can clear that up.
I think the ridiculousness of this and the tabloids that you are quoting and referencing are insane. And this has been
So that's a no?
something that I've refuted
Is
for
that a no?
years, and I continue to do that.
So it's a
what
no.
I would tell you is
We
when
can move
in
on.
regards
Hold
to
on,
what you're
Madam Senator,
doing.
we can move on. I'm not going to belabor it.
This is one of those hearing moments where the exact wording matters more than the speech around it. Moskowitz is asking for a clean denial, and very specifically, he wants it on the record. That is not random. A lot of these exchanges are about locking someone into language that can be judged later. Noem does not give him the clean one-word answer he is fishing for. Instead, she attacks the premise, the sources, and the framing. Politically, that is understandable. But visually and rhetorically, it creates a problem. Because when someone is asked for a direct no and does everything around it except say it plainly, that is exactly the kind of clip that gets replayed. To me, that was the point where the tension changed from hostile to awkward. Moskowitz clearly believed he had found the pressure point, and Noem clearly did not want to validate the question on his terms. Would you read that as a real answer, or as an attempt to avoid giving him the wording he wanted?
This is what you do.
Hold on,
The
I'm not doing anything.
Liberal left
Okay.
is you go off and you
I-
attack
I was-
conservative women, and you say that we're either stupid
I haven't
or
said
we're
anything.
sluts.
All right, so listen.
And that's what you do.
Yesterday,
And I will tell
Richard,
you, sir,
yes, reclaiming
I
my
will tell
time,
you,
Mr.
sir,
Chairman.
I
Mr.
am
Chairman,
neither of
reclaiming my
those.
time.
This is where the hearing stops being mainly about FEMA management and becomes a fight over identity, motive, and political style. Noem is no longer answering the substance. She is reframing the whole confrontation as a familiar culture war attack against conservative women. That move does two things at once. First, it rallies people who already think these hearings are stacked or theatrical. Second, it tries to turn Moskowitz from investigator into aggressor. In other words, she is trying to make the audience judge his behavior instead of her answers. The risk for her is that this also looks like a major pivot away from the specific question. The risk for him is that once the exchange gets this personal, some viewers stop listening for facts and start picking teams. My read on that section is pretty simple. Both of them knew the clip had left policy territory and entered the part that spreads fastest online. And Moskowitz responds by dragging the conversation right back to the question of Lewandowski's role.
You were asked by Richard Blumenthal
This is from
yesterday.
the
You were asked
out of
by
the
Richard
Democratic
Blumenthal
Party.
yesterday if Corey was involved in approving contracts. You said no. Do you want to correct that?
What I would say is that he has an advisor to the Department of Homeland Security, has no
Madam Secretary,
decision-making
do you want to correct
authority.
it? Yes or no? You don't want to correct
no
it? Fine.
decision-making authority,
hold
no
on.
role in
Not a
contracting.
problem. According to one of the FEMA administrators that you fired, there is nothing, including contracts, that is brought to you that he hasn't reviewed. In fact, a significant amount of DHS internal routing documents has his signature on it above deputy secretaries. Okay, that former FEMA administrator wasn't fired by you, the secretary. He was fired by Corey. It was Corey that called him into your office. It was Corey that made him to submit to a polygraph test. The $100,000 spending rule that you created that comes to your desk, you're not even sitting at your desk. It's Corey who's sitting there.
This may be the most important substantive section in the whole exchange. Not the loudest, but maybe the most important. Moskowitz is trying to create a contradiction between Noem's public claim and what he says insiders have told him. Again, look at the tactic. He asks whether she wants to correct a prior answer. That is a very prosecutorial way to question someone. He is not asking for her opinion. He is implying the previous answer is already in danger. Noem sticks to a narrow defense, no decision-making authority, no role in contracts. Moskowitz answers with a broader accusation. Maybe no formal authority on paper, but practical influence everywhere. That distinction is huge. A lot of Washington power works exactly in that gray zone between official title and actual leverage. This is the kind of moment that leaves viewers with a pretty basic question. If he has no meaningful role, why does he keep showing up in the chain, according to the allegation? That is the shadow hanging over this whole section. And then Moskowitz goes from trying to corner her to trying to politically bury her.
ISIS said the Republicans should be happy at the job that you're doing. Really? You're looking at the person who single-handedly took the president's signature core issue, immigration, the issue that got him elected from 59% to 39%. 200 miles of border walls being held up by you. They had to bring in Tom Homan, pull out of Minnesota. I think the country needs a national divorce from you on biblical grounds. I mean, if Donald Trump was still apprentice Trump, he would look at you and he would realize you're the weakest cabinet member and he would fire you. And if the president said to you that only way DHS could reopen is if you resigned, I hope you would take him up on it.
At this point, Moskowitz is not really just examining performance anymore. He is arguing, in public, that she has become a liability to the administration itself. That is a different level of attack. And notice how he does it. He does not frame this as a left versus right argument. He frames it as a failure on Trump's own strongest issue, immigration. That is tactical. He is trying to hit her from inside the logic of the administration, not from outside it. The apprentice Trump line is built to travel because it turns the criticism into something visual and familiar. But it also shows that by this stage, the exchange has fully shifted from oversight into spectacle. The policy case is still there underneath it, but now it is wrapped in lines meant to sting and spread. And after all that, he closes with a prop, which tells you he knew exactly how he wanted this segment to end. This is the kind of ending lawmakers use when they know the hearing clip is going online. It is visual, sarcastic, and easy to understand even if someone has not watched the whole exchange. The gift is not really a gift. It is a final public reminder of an earlier embarrassment dropped in after several minutes of attacks about FEMA, leadership, contracts, and Lewandowski. So the message is basically, after all these serious accusations, I am still going to send you out of here wearing one more headline. What makes it land is that Noem does not explode in response. She stays controlled and says thank you. That probably helped her more than any of the crosstalk earlier, because by the end, calm can sometimes read stronger than outrage. Still, as a closing image, Moskowitz got exactly what he wanted. A memorable prop moment people will share, even if they ignore the rest of the hearing. What stands out after watching all of that is not just that this was heated. It is that the argument kept circling back to one bigger question. Who is actually exercising influence inside DHS, and how much of the department's slowdown is tied to that power structure? Moskowitz came in with a strategy. He used headlines, his own emergency management background, a leaked report, repeated yes or no pressure, and then a prop at the end. Noem, for her part, tried to push back by treating the whole thing as a bad faith political attack and refusing to accept his framing. The problem is that hearings like this are often judged less by the full explanation and more by the moments that feel unresolved. And this one leaves a few hanging in the air. Did she fully answer the Lewandowski issue? Did he prove as much as he implied? Or did the hearing mostly reveal how much distrust is already built into the way this department is being run? That is probably the part people will keep arguing about after the clip ends. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe and stick around, because hearings like this usually tell you a lot more than the polished statements do.